Hey everyone, this is an unboxing of the MSI X99S SLI Krait Edition motherboard. Just got this today. I think it's only been out a short period of time, even though X99 motherboards have been out since late last year. This is a newer board from MSI, and if you're familiar with the MSI X99S SLI Plus motherboard, then this one will look pretty familiar, but also has a lot of different features, and I would say better features than that board. That makes it more of a higher end board, closer to their M-Power and gaming series. So this is just the front of the box. You're gonna see a lot of edits here while I put this unboxing together, and I'm also gonna show you it installed in my case as well. So yeah, let's get started. We can see that it is built with, as they say, military class 4 components. So basically what they're saying is this board is not cheap, and should last you quite a while. Multi-GPU support, of course. Audio boost. This motherboard actually has Realtek audio, and everyone's probably familiar with that. This actually has a better, newer audio, Realtek audio engine over the MSI Plus X99 board. For whatever reason, on that board they shipped a older, not as good essentially onboard audio. So they fixed that here with this board, which is probably why the board also costs a little bit more as well. Over here we have information about the storage, M2, SATA Express, OC engine, obviously DDR4 up to 3333 overclock. A lot of these are, features are standard with most X99 motherboards. I would say this one, they promote more of the military class component, whereas you don't really see that promoted a lot on other boards. And it really is true, this MSI board does have higher quality components compared to other X99 boards. So we'll go over that when we look at the motherboard. Alrighty, and here we see the actual motherboard outside of the wrapping and the box. So, I mean, if you're familiar with X99 boards, you're going to see, pretty similar layout here to other X99 boards. So, obviously, the one thing that's, stands out, with this one compared to other ones is the black and white. I actually have a white case, and I've gone with a white and black theme overall for my system. So, really the only two motherboards out there in the X99 series that give you black and white options are this one now, and before this came out there was really just the Asus X99 Deluxe, and I actually have that board. That's the one I'm switching I'm switching to this one from the X99 Deluxe, and I know a lot of people are probably going to say, well, that's a downgrade. Why are you doing that? It's not as much of a downgrade depending on how you look at it. I mean, that's what we're going to do when we go through this board. Because as this is a newer board, this came out after the Deluxe, there's actually been things that have changed. And I mean, MSI does do things a little bit different than Asus or Asus do, however you want to call them. So first off, the one thing that I do like about this MSI board is that right above the top PCIe Express connection is, I mean, if you're familiar with Asus boards and a lot of motherboards, they usually put like a huge heatsink right there, right where that MSI logo is. And I mean, it's even with the Deluxe, it is a pain in the butt. And it's not like you have to change your video card a lot, but I mean, to be able to get to push that, down, to get the video card out with a heatsink right below the CPU is a pain in the butt, and especially if you have a big CPU cooler like I do. So I mean, I'm glad that they didn't put one there, and you know what? It's probably more for looks anyways, because if you look at the Asus boards, I'm gonna call them Asus because that's what I'm familiar with. usually they put it there because it's more for branding. You know, it's sometimes they have an LED on there. It's all for looks. You don't really need to have a heatsink there per se, especially if you're using components that, with the MSI, don't generate a lot of heat. So, you know, as you can see here, right above the CPU, you can see there is your power phases, and there is quite a bit of them. There's actually 12 phases on this board. The Asus X99 Deluxe, if I recall, and someone's going to correct me and I'm probably wrong, but I do believe it actually only has 8 phases. So even though Asus promotes with the X99 on their motherboards the OC socket, which essentially is a few extra pins in the CPU socket that they say improves you know, overclocking for CPUs and memory, you know, essentially, you know, the more power phases you have, you know, basically means you have more power, so you can overclock more, and then you're just limited to essentially the parts you have and what they're capable of doing. So I mean, you know, as much as Asus will tell you that the OC socket is amazing, you know, no one else is doing it. But typically, you know, the more phases you have, the better overclocking you have anyway. So yeah, so that's, you know, we'll see what happens. But right now I'm getting 4.4 gigahertz on my 5820K. You know, that's basically what I could get from the Deluxe. I couldn't really go much higher without really boosting the voltages. So I'm curious to see if this does any better, worse, or about the same. We'll see. It's gonna be an interesting test, I think. And then there's your DDR4 memory, of course. What I really like about this, and you know, again, some people will go, well, you know what, if you know what you're doing, this shouldn't be a problem anyway, but you have the black and white for the memory. So you know where the memory goes. So if you're not filling them all up, then you know if you need, you know, quad channel, you're gonna only put the RAM in the white, or you're only gonna put the RAM in the black. I mean, it seems so simple, but I mean, most motherboards, they don't do it. They're all the same. They're usually just one color, which is usually black. And I mean, if you're new to this, people can probably get confused by that, even though, of course, I wouldn't be, and probably a lot of you guys wouldn't either. The other thing you'll notice about the just general aesthetics around the CPU area is you can see they're using different componentry. So they're using super chokes, they're using high C caps, you know, and they're using the dark aluminum caps as you know, caps for all the power as well. So you know, essentially, you know, this board is, you know, should be maximizing your power and you know, at the same time giving you the best power efficiency and temperature that is possible. Over here you can see the onboard audio, the audio boost, as they say, for the Realtek. You know, I won't be using the onboard audio, but you know, some people, you know, will, and you know, you're gonna get pretty good audio from this because it's using a newer Realtek. So that's good. You know, you have your standard PCIe. You have you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 full, and then 2 of the smaller ones. There is your battery, which has got the cool little snake guy on it. And there's your spot for your M2. I mean, I'm not really getting into that. It's kind of cool that the board supports it, but I'm not going that route. Obviously, there you have your nice big heatsink for the chipset. Actually, going back up to here, you can see there's a nice big heatsink there to cool the power, which is good. They're not heating anything over here. You know, I would assume, you know, that they're only heating what they know they have to, and what's most important. So over here we have your SATA connections. There's no, it's all Intel based through the X99 chipset, so there is no like with the Deluxe, Asus Deluxe, you get, you know, as media for more. You know, this should be plenty. I mean, I only have I have a solid state drive, and then I have 4 mechanical, 7200 RPM drives for storage and things like that. So I'm not even using all of these. So any more than this is kind of overkill. But I mean, but if you use more than this, then obviously this is not the board for you. You're gonna have to go with one that has more connections. There's your standard 24 pin. There's the onboard USB 3. They also have another one which I like, that is the other way, so you don't have a cable sticking up. That's going to be the one that I use. What else do we got over here? Obviously you have your back I/O. So you have over to the far left, you have a CMOS clear button, which is great. That's also on the inside as well. You have 2 USB, the black ones on the far left are 2 USB 2, and then in the center there, the blue ones are USB 3. With 2 different, they're not through the Intel chipset actually, those ones in the middle. They're VIA, which is, you don't normally see VIA anymore, but they're on there. And then as media. And then you have your Intel Ethernet right there, and right below that is 2 USB 3.0, and those are through the Intel chipset. So those are going to be the ones you want to use. Typically, as media and VIA are not as good performance-wise. You want to use the built-in chipset. And then you have your connections for onboard audio, which I won't be using because I have a Sound Blaster Z. What else? We got your power reset, OC engine, or OC Genie, I guess is what they like to call it. So you can push that button, the board will automatically overclock you depending on what the board thinks your CPU and memory are capable of. Of course, we won't be using that. You have dual BIOS to, I believe that is over here. Yeah, there's your dual BIOS switch, left and right. There's your SATA Express. So actually there are more. So you can use SATA Express. There's one of your fan, 4 pins. Board has, I think, 5 or 6 onboard fan headers for 4-pin, which is nice. There is your USB 2.0. No, sorry, USB 3.0, I believe. No, that one was up there, was 3.0. So these are your USB 2.0 internal headers. How could we forget the accessories? So, accessories. You get your obvious I/O shield. You get your connections for your hard drive, SATA cables, SLI connector for only 2 ways. So if you need more than that, then you're gonna have to get one that does that. And more SATA. You get your manual. This is how you use this motherboard. And then your drivers, and that's pretty much it. Nothing exciting with the accessories. Alright, so here we have the motherboard installed in the case. So you can see there, it's kind of hard to see because, obviously I have this huge CPU cooler on there. It's the Cooler Master Hyper 612 version 2, I believe. And a single 120 Corsair SP 120 fan on there. All my fans in this case are Corsair, whether they're LED or they're the removable ring ones like you see there, which I have with the white to go along with the white theme of my case and the motherboard. Actually, it's kind of hard to even tell the motherboard is white right now because it's so hard to see it. Yeah, everything's running fine. I'm overclocked currently to 4.4 gigahertz on a 5820K. Those are G.Skill 2400 megahertz sticks. Right now I'm at 16 gigs. I am planning on moving up to more, but so far I just have 16 gigs, and it's, you know, it's more than enough for my needs so far. One thing that I forgot to mention in earlier is, you know, you have your standard 24 pin power there, but actually up there it's gonna be kind of hard to see, but you have an 8 pin, but then also you'll see there's a 4 pin right beside it. So this motherboard actually has 3 connectors for power. So, you know, theoretically you can feed more juice into those 12 power phases. There you can see that there's the big black heat sink over the phases right now in the VRM. So I mean, right now I haven't tried pushing it more than what I know the CPU is capable of right now, which is 4.4 gigahertz. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I'd like to get at least 100 megahertz more. It'd be nice to get up to 4.5. You know, 4.6 would be great, but I mean, you know, I'm not gonna complain. So there we have, obviously, the video card, which is a GTX 980. It's the Gigabyte WindForce G1 Gaming. By far the best air cooler in the aftermarket range that you can find. As good as the NVIDIA reference coolers are, this is in my opinion the best out there. And then obviously you move into water cooling and things like that, but if you're sticking with air, this is by far the best. And it's I keep it at a fixed fan speed, 40%, and I never see temps over 70. So it's that good, and that's at full load. There you see the very small Sound Blaster Z. And yeah, I just have one video card. I'm totally a believer of single GPU. I refuse to use multiple GPUs because they have so many issues. Not necessarily the cards themselves, but I mean the support in terms of applications and games and things like that. And then we have a Corsair AX760 power supply, and I mean, you see a lot of people that have, like, you know, 1,000 watt power supply and all this, you know, craziness, but I mean, this is really, for what I am doing, all I need, and there was no reason to pay more for a 1,000 watt or higher power supply. I find a lot of people, they just tend to, you know, go big just because they want to, you know, have the bling associated with their case. Like this Corsair power supply, it's the AX, it's platinum rated, so it's very efficient. And in fact, even though it's, you know, it's a 760 watt power supply, in actuality, if you were to really push it, you could, you know, go up to like 1,000 watts. But of course, your efficiency numbers are going to go down. But my system doesn't draw even nearly 760 watts anyway. Over on this side, we have my hard drives, my mechanical hard drives. So 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a great tray system where you can just, you know, easily take it in and out. It's screwless, so that's great. At the bottom of the case, we have 2 Corsair fans for intake. These are 120s. All my fans are in the quiet series. So because I've catered my case to be as quiet as possible. As you can see, they're pretty dirty, so I have to clean those. At the back of the case, you can see I do have an exhaust Corsair 140 fan. It's an LED, white LED, again going with the white theme. At the top of the case, you can see I have 2 140 fans, and again they have the white rings going with the theme. Oh, the back of a computer case. What you don't want people to see. So, I mean, this is my mess. You know, fortunately this case, which is the Corsair 780T, it gives you a lot of room. even putting the side panel back on, even with some wires kind of, you know, sticking out a bit, I can still close the case and not have to worry about doing a lot of tying and tightening and things like that, and hiding cables. But this case is pretty great too, because if, you know, as you can see, I haven't really done it, but, you know, right down there, you know, you have a lot of hidden compartment area where you can put wires and things like that. You know, so there you can see my SSD, which is the Samsung 850 Pro. This is kind of cool. Like, more cases should do this. It's kind of a right behind the mechanical side, where you can see there's the back of my mechanical drives. There's actually I could put 2 more SSDs in there, and just sort of tuck them away, and because they're so small, it's great. So that's more cases should do it. But yeah, like, you know, nothing exciting here, just a, you know, cable full of mess. You know, to even try and describe to you what I've done here in terms of what is, you know, obviously you have, there's my, you know, there's the 24 pin, you know, it's pretty obvious. It's the thickest of them all. But, you know, there's the back of the motherboard, you know, nothing too exciting, you know, it's a typical, you know, LGA 2011 backplate. And yeah, so next I'll show you the system booted up with, you know, all the lights and everything, and then we'll have a quick look through the MSI BIOS. So here we have the front of the case turned on. This is with the fan speed controller is set to full. It sounds louder than it normally is. I usually keep the fan speed for the intakes and the exhaust at low, but by default this case, when you first boot it up, automatically sets them all to full speed. Kind of annoying. I wish it would remember what your last setting was, but that's how it is. So this is the front. Now we'll move into the inside of the case. And here we have the inside of the case turned on. So as you can see, it gives off quite a bit of light, even with, you know, the limited LEDs that are in there right now. So, you know, the WindForce logo lights up. The Sound Blaster lights up red, which is kind of annoying because, you know, I don't mind the blue, but, you know, red is not really part of my my case. But Sound Blaster has put this LED in there, and it's not adjustable. I know I've seen people mod them, but I mean, I'm not that brave. So it's kind of annoying, and there's no option to turn it off easily. But other than that, you know, yeah, I still have to do some more cable cleanup and things like that. Like you can see, there's the CPU fan is kind of lazily just going straight to the CPU header rather than being routed through the back and then in, only because the cable isn't long enough, and I actually have ordered some 4-pin power extension for that exact reason. So that'll be cleaned up soon. But yeah, so this again, sound wise, you're hearing it. You're hearing it at full speed. Normally it's not this loud. Now this is how I like to be on my computer, in complete darkness, with only just a little bit of a backlight, which you can't even see. My monitor actually, well, you might be able to see it a little bit. You see that little light there. My monitor has a backlight, so that's usually the only light I have in here at night, when I'm on the computer most of the time. So yeah, here is the MSI BIOS, Click BIOS 4 they call it. It's a standard UEFI BIOS, and you're presented with this kind of he looks pretty angry. It's obviously a Krait snake, and yeah, you're kind of given this overview screen where you can go into your settings and your overclock and your BIOS flashing, your profiles on the right hand side, hardware monitor, and then the board explorer, which basically shows you kind of you know, what's plugged in and what's what. So in many ways I like this BIOS. There's some things I like about this MSI BIOS and some things that I don't. I mean, especially when I compare it to the Asus BIOS, which is, you know, pretty well known, and I think, well, some people would argue, but I would say Asus has probably got the best UEFI BIOS out there. But this one has some neat features as well. Like for one thing I've always complained about Asus BIOSes is that the resolution is crap. And I mean, it's just you can tell it's not, you know, displaying at a high resolution. Whereas this one, like, I don't think this is like super high resolution or anything. Like, maybe it is, I don't know, but I mean, I can tell just by the text and everything that this BIOS is more resolution. It's outputting more resolution, so it looks cleaner. It looks clearer. One thing I don't like is, for whatever reason, the temperatures are not accurate here. My CPU right now, it's claiming is at idle 40 and 38, 39, 40, whatever. It most definitely is not. It's more so probably around at most the 30 mark. So I don't know why it's wrong here. But I mean, I've never used the BIOS for accuracy and temps anyway. So there you can see we have an overview. It tells you there's your CPU, there's where you're overclocked at, there's your frequency of your memory, how much memory you have. This is kind of neat how it shows your boot device priority, you know, in a visual way, in a graphic way there. And it's saying the time even, and your, you know, the date if you were to forget. Which, I mean, how often many of us are in the computer for long periods of time, it's very likely. And then your BIOS version, which I am running the most recent version. When I first got this board, it came with version 23, so I had to update to version 23.2. So I'm gonna just yeah, go through a few of the other settings and then wrap up this video. So under the settings and advanced area, you have your typical options for you know, doing things with the PCI subsystem and the integrated peripherals, which I have turned all off in cases of you know, like I didn't need the onboard audio, so I turned that off. I'm using the onboard network controller, so I kept that on. But most of the times with BIOSes, I will turn off. If I can turn something off that I don't need, I'll turn it off, because I mean, no point in having it on, and you know, I see it as a power you know, thing as well. So you know, if you can save a little bit of juice, why not? Not that I really think it helps overclocking or anything like that, but I mean, hey, why use more power than you have to? Under the overclocking setting, you have this screen, which is very, you know, most of this is very familiar with, you know, the Asus BIOS, and I'm sure, you know, with Gigabyte and all the other guys out there, you know, so you can see, you know, there's my ratio, which is 44, and I've turned off speed step, and you know, the turbo is turned on for both Intel and the enhanced turbo, which would be MSI's version, which I guess expands upon Intel's, and Asus does this as well, but apparently MSI is a little bit more aggressive in terms of boosting. So in theory, you should probably get higher clock speeds and thus performance with MSI than you would Asus. Asus tends to be a little bit more conservative and favor stability and power and things like that. Yeah, and then you have, there's your base clock setting, which I keep at default. I had to actually go in and and set my RAM to 2400. By default it was I believe 21. And then what else do we have here? Down below you have your timing. So under advanced I have my timings, my main timing, which I set manually. So I have the command rate at 1. And my RAM actually is set for 15, 15, 15, 35. I've actually gone lower. DDR4 memory makers are actually they're being conservative with their timings actually. Like I've gone down to 13, 13, 35 and perfectly stable. Now if I were to bump up the frequency I probably wouldn't be, but I mean I tend to favor low latency than really insane high frequency, but you know, everyone's different. We have your your they call it, what's it, digital power, same thing. You know, most Asus has the same thing, and I'm sure Gigabyte do, and all the other guys. I mainly keep this stuff on auto. You know, if I really want to tweak it out and get into that, I will go in there and I'll play with the phase control and the overcurrent stuff. The only thing I've modified here is I've changed the V droop to rather than being on auto, I've set it to 50%. There are other options here. You don't get as many. You get you have 25, 50, 75, 87.5, which is a strange number, and then 100. Asus actually has, like, at least on the 99 Deluxe, they had lots. But the problem is they didn't do it in percentages, so you didn't. It was like level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. I think it went up to, like, all the way up to like level 10 or even more, and you're like, holy crap! But you never knew what the percentages were, so it's kind of hard to judge. So I try to keep it low. I mean, I'm pretty sure on the X99 Deluxe I kept it at like level 1 or 2, but again, I didn't really know what that was. So I mean, I wish there was a few more percentages here, but other than that, yeah, that's that. So then we have our voltages. So that is your input voltage. I have set that manually because auto does tend to set voltages higher, so usually I don't stick with the auto voltages for very specific voltages like this one. So like, for example, on auto this was going up to like 1.9, and that's, you know, that's pretty high. You shouldn't need to go that high unless you're doing some really serious overclocking. So 1.8 is plenty, and with that V droop set to 50%, as you can see, it's not really changing much. And then down below we got the CPU core voltage, which I have set to 125. Pretty sure I could drop it a little bit and I'd still be stable at 4.4, but yeah, for now I have it at that. I also I have my mode set to adaptive mode actually. A lot of people like to use offset. I don't. What I like about adaptive is basically it adjusts the voltage depending on what your CPU frequency and your load is. So I mean, you won't like right now it's showing that the voltage is 1.256, which is accurate. In the BIOS, it always shows full voltages. It doesn't do any power saving things. But in Windows with adaptive mode, I can my voltages go down really low when at idle, but when I'm doing stuff and gaming, whatever, it'll boost up, and so you're getting that power savings and that lower heat when you don't really need your voltage to be set really high. So you can see here, I also set the DRAM to manual 1.2. That's standard for DDR4 for most kits. I'm not doing any real overclocking with the memory, so I don't really have to adjust that. This has been left to auto, but you know, that's a pretty good setting actually for auto, so I agree with that setting. I mean, if I agree with the voltage, what it gives, I'll leave it on auto, but sometimes I don't, so I have to manually set one. Now if we go down here, nope, went too far. We go to the CPU features, is interesting. So here you have a lot of choices. For the most part, I didn't touch any of this. I left it all at default. But if we go down to the C state, I turn that on. A lot of people will tell you to turn this off because they, you know, say, nope, you should have the full max performance that you can get. Or they tell you, well, I mean, if you're overclocking, you should turn C state off because it can, you know, mess up your stability. Number one, I don't agree with, but number two, okay, maybe that's possible. Not my case. I think it depends on how much you're overclocking, and if you know the limits of what your overclock is. But for me, I don't believe in using more power than you have to. It's smart enough to know when to, you know, go full load and when to, you know, pull it back a little bit and you know, save you some power, which then lowers your heat and thus lowers your electricity bill. So I keep it on. And then I also turn on C1E, which basically C1E is it lowers your core frequency. So at idle, even though my overclock is 4.4, if I'm just doing stuff in Windows, watching some YouTube videos or whatever, I'm not going to be at 4.4 gigahertz. It's gonna adjust to what I'm doing. So yeah, I totally believe in that. Package C state limit, I just keep on auto, but there are other settings in here if you wanted to do things like C6 would be, you know, it would turn off certain features of your CPU. So for example, your onboard cache, you know, it would dial that back down. But doing that actually affects more your performance because it takes longer for that to ramp back up and to give you that back when you need it. So I auto typically keeps that off unless you specifically ask for it. Down here, yeah, like anyone runs 2001 anymore, right? But yeah, if you turn that on, I mean, if you still run that benchmark, it's supposed to give you more performance. But I mean, honestly, I haven't run that one in a long time, but I can see some people crying about it if it wasn't there. Other things here that might be more important, but again, I keep it on auto, but like, I mean, some people will tell you to turn off these two features, the internal VR OCP protection, internal VR efficiency management. These two, a lot of people will tell you to disable because it could potentially limit your overclock. It is true. I keep it on auto because if I can get where I want to be and still have them on auto, then I might as well keep them on, because again, these are more for, again, keeping, you know, being more power efficient and your thermals and things like that. So, I mean, if you're having a hard time getting overclocked to where you want to be, then yes, you could try turning those off. If it doesn't help, then turn them back on, because, you know, it's obviously not what's limiting your overclock. Many things can limit your overclock. You know, it's not just as simple as turning a setting off or on. You know, it could be the voltages, which usually it is. Or, you know, sometimes it's a CPU can only do what it can do, and even if you throw as much voltage at it as you can, it still won't do anything, and you're just, you know, increasing power and heat and not doing anything. So yeah, this is kind of, I guess I should show a little bit of the, like, the board explorer is kind of neat, actually. So you can see there, there's actually the motherboard, and it tells you what's turned on essentially with what's highlighted. It might be kind of hard to see in this video, but obviously you can see, I have a video card installed, which is right here, and it tells you, right down there, okay, you're running a NVIDIA, video card running at 16. It doesn't tell you exactly what kind of video card it is, but it's smart enough to know something. Yeah, you hover over one of your RAM, it tells you, okay, well, there you got DDR4 G-Skill. And it actually tells you the model number there, which is kind of neat. So, I mean, nothing too exciting. I mean, I don't know how useful that really is, but it is something that's neat. So, over here you have, again, these settings were, the one setting was on the motherboard itself, which is that OC Genie, which essentially if you push that button, it's going to try and do an overclock for you, and then the XMP, which automatically sets, your memory if you don't know what to do manually. But yeah, so that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video, and so far so good. No problems with this motherboard. I definitely would recommend it. But I have a lot more tweaking to do.